Hello, my name is Taylor Huffman, and the country I will be discussing today is Mexico. Mexico is located between the United States and Guatemala and Belize. It borders the North Pacific Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and part of the Caribbean Sea. Mexico also is the north border of the 7 countries considered to be Central America. The countries include Belize, Guatemala, Costa Rica, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama. For size reference, it is almost 3 times the size of Texas. The climate ranges from tropical in some parts to desert in others. Mexico consists of everything from plateaus to coastal plains to mountains and more. The lowest point is the Laguna Salada, and the highest is the volcano Pico de Orizaba. Mexico is the 9th largest economy in the world, with approximately 54.9% of the land being used for agricultural purposes. Its main agricultural exports include tomatoes, coffee, wheat, sugarcane, and corn. Other exports include cars, vehicle parts, and computers. Mexico sends most of its exports to the United States, Canada, China, Japan, Germany, and South Korea. It is the 11th most populous country with approximately 125,959,205,000 people from an estimate in July of 2018. 25% of the people live in or near Mexico City. The natural hazards are volcanoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, and tsunamis, which depend on the specific location in the country. The topics I will discuss today are the history and cultural background of the country, U.S. involvement in Mexican affairs and their relations, and current internal issues. First, we will talk about the history and cultural background of Mexico. The ethnic groups consist of 62% Mestizo, 28% predominantly Amerindian or full Amerindian, and 10% other. Religion is distributed as 82.7% Roman Catholic, 1.6% Pentecostal, 6.4% other evangelical churches, 1.9% other, 4.7% none, and 2.7% unspecified. Because Mexico's culture is so vast and rich, its history involves many different aspects. One long-lasting aspect is the curandero healers that are common everywhere in Latin America. Curanderos are known for using herbs and possessing healing abilities that are passed down through families. The curanderos in Mexico have been present since the pre-Hispanic period, especially amongst indigenous people. They take on the role of a doctor or a psychiatrist. Using oils, prayer, and spiritual cleansings, curanderos mostly solve spiritual or emotional ailments. Pre-colonial Mexico consisted of many advanced Amerindian civilizations, such as the Olmecs, which were Mexico's first known society, the Mayans, and the Aztecs. Architecture, math, science, and agriculture are just a few of the successful accomplishments these civilizations mastered. The discovery of the Americas can also be referred to as the exploitation of the people, since their land, religions, and culture were stripped from them. During the colonial period, many efforts were made to Christianize the inhabitants. For example, when Hernán Cortés arrived in Veracruz in 1519, he formed many allies on his way to Tenochtitlan, so he could attack the people, murder the king, Moctezuma II, and conquer the Aztecs. Cortés then colonized that area and gave it a new name, Nueva España. Spain controlled much of the Aztec Empire and enslaved the majority of the indigenous population. Another devastating effect of Cortés's arrival to the population was the diseases they brought with them. Missionaries built churches, and millions of people were converted to Catholicism, which manipulated the heritage of the indigenous. After gaining independence, the affairs of the Catholic Church were promoted through legal framework. Also, efforts were made to weaken the incredible power that the Church possessed. Despite the restriction of its power, the Catholic Church later built social amenities and formed a political party, the National Action Party. A revolution led by Francisco Madero in 1911 that overthrew the Mexican dictator is the spark that caused the Mexican Civil War against unjust dictatorships. After succeeding, one of Madero's generals, Victoriano Huerta, betrayed Madero. Huerta led a counter-revolution and executed Madero. A loyal follower of Madero began a revolt, causing a civil war to break out. The current president is Enrique Peña Nieto. In December of 2018, a new president will be elected. Next, I will discuss United States involvement in Mexican affairs and relations between the two countries. The United States has been heavily involved with Mexican affairs since the Mexican Civil War. After Huerta became the Mexican leader, the United States refused to recognize him. The U.S. proceeded to attempt to make Huerta resign. An American officer was arrested in Mexico, and when Mexicans refused to apologize, the customs house in Veracruz was seized, killing 400 Mexicans in the process. Huerta forcibly resigned after, and other countries mediated the situation. Recent relations between the two countries have been strained with the election of Donald Trump as President of the United States. Trump threatened Nieto because of an unresolved drug trafficking situation involving a possible military intervention. Trump has even threatened Nieto to send troops to Mexico if the drug cartel issues are not solved. Some people claim that Trump's statements appear as if an intervention has been planned for over 8 years. Border issues between the two countries are very relevant and serious. In San Diego, California, there are prototypes for the infamous wall that will be placed between Mexico and the United States. The 8 prototypes are 30-foot tall structures. None of the current prototypes have proven to withstand weather issues, so the wall will not be put into place in the very near future. Land and border issues are not limited to just land and walls necessarily. Another border struggle deals with water. The Rio Grande spans the entirety of the Mexico-Texas border. Each location is allowed to take a certain portion of water. Hidden aquifers are deep below the surface as well, and the owner of those aquifers is unknown. According to Zoe Schlanger, an environment reporter, by 2060 there will not be enough water in the Rio Grande to produce. Because of this, Mexico and the United States will be forced to use groundwater. The problems with this are that there is not a treaty between Mexico and the U.S. covering groundwater, and groundwater depletion has caused land subsidence in several areas. More problems will certainly arise from this issue in the future, as it is currently being ignored. Besides issues with other countries, there are many other issues as well. Lastly, I will discuss current internal issues. Mexico's culture is very traditional. One effect of these views is the widespread mistreatment of women across the country. This abuse manifests itself in many aspects of women's lives. One place that inequality is very noticeable for women is the production of food. Over 50% of the food produced in Mexico is by women, but only 10% of women have access to land or other resources required to make the food. Gender inequality is noticeable in jobs as well. Underpayment is an issue many workers suffer. The number of Mexican women who die while giving birth is 6 times more than the national average. Domestic violence is perhaps the most pressing issue that women face. 71% of women ages 15 to 49 suffer intimate partner violence. Only recently have women gained rights to help overcome this struggle. One example is a law that permits divorce to escape violence. Despite these improvements and laws aimed at aiding women, violence still persists. Women do not receive the help they need from the government and law enforcement. A study was performed on violence experienced before and during pregnancy of Mexican women. 914 women were interviewed, and 25% suffered violence during their pregnancy. The experiment concluded that pregnancy is not an initiating factor of violence, but it is still common among pregnant women. Healthcare is another issue. Through the Seguro Popular, a program designed to make treatments more affordable for a larger amount of people, healthcare was made universal in 2004. The Seguro Popular gave 50 million previously uninsured people benefits. Despite the obvious successes of the program, opinions are still divided. Some claim that the quality is poor, and others believe healthcare equality has been achieved. People supporting healthcare reform do so claiming that more can be done since healthcare expenditures are only 6.3% of the GDP. Curanderos today are mostly used by lower classes because of the lack of access to modern medicine or the low prices charged. Air pollution is a serious issue in the urban cities and capital along the border. After the financial crisis of 2008, Mexico's economy suffered greatly. Some effects that workers still face today are unequal income distribution, high underemployment, and little to no opportunities for advancement for the indigenous population. Since 2007, very powerful drug trafficking organizations have caused thousands of drug-related homicides. The infant mortality rate and maternal mortality rate are quite high when compared with other countries. To conclude, we have discussed the history and cultural background of Mexico, U.S. involvement in Mexican affairs and their relations, and current internal issues. We also covered the numerous subcategories that constitute these topics. It's impossible to discuss all the necessary information about a country, but my presentation has covered a variety. Mexico's history consists of civil wars, curanderos, pre-colonial Mexico, the exploitation of the people, revolutions, and so much more. The relationship between Mexico and the United States has always been strained. The United States has been involved in Mexico's affairs for years. Sometimes this invasion is aimed at aiding the people, but other times it has a negative effect. Mexico's traditional culture creates the widespread mistreatment of women that affects their job opportunities and safety. Healthcare, pollution, and drug trafficking are other issues affecting the country. From reading Latin America at 200, researching for our case study assignments, and watching Professor Resende's lectures, I have learned so much about Mexico and Latin America in general. The topics discussed in the class are information that I would never have learned without taking this course. The course has taught me everything about Latin America, from wars to education to public policy and more. The case study assignments and discussions specifically have helped me tap into my creative side and take a more thoughtful approach when I'm introduced to new topics, instead of allowing information to flow in one ear and out the other. From researching for this assignment, I have become so much more knowledgeable about Latin America, but also more open-minded and interested in other cultures besides my own. This has been my presentation on Mexico. Thank you for watching.